Good morning and welcome. Buenos dias y bienvenido and herzlich willkommen to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. We are located on the lands of the Chichimeca, the Otomi and the Nahua peoples. And through Zoom, we are creating communities from all across Mexico and the United States and Canada, and perhaps beyond that. You know, in North America, among the Native Americans, there is a saying that's mitakaye oyasin, mitakaye oyasin, meaning we're all related. We're all connected in this interdependent web of life, connecting past generations with us today and perhaps also our future generations into an unfathomable future. I'm Jürgen Ahlers, and I'm a member of your board, and I'm delighted to be your service leader for today. We invite you to look at your order of service for announcements and any activities that we have in our fellowship. And if you would like to be here at the Aldea next Sunday, we would encourage you to please send an email to Diana Amaya by Thursday, letting her know that you would like to join us in person here at the Aldea at our third in-person gathering now. This is our second. So let's see, I have a couple of other things. The ushers at the end of the service will be leading those of you in the Aldea from the back rows, moving to the front rows, and you can meet outside and greet with one another. If you're on Zoom, please feel free to stay tuned so that you can join Tom in the, as we usually have it on Zoom, in the discussion with Tom and greet one another on Zoom. So please stay tuned for that. And finally, as Bill Dalsimer so greatly always says, please put your mobile devices in a worshipful mood so that we don't have any disturbances. And now I'd like to pass it over to Dan Neuspiel, our president, to give us an update report on the COVID task force.
Welcome, everyone. I bring you an update from our COVID-19 task force. We've learned of many members and friends who've had breakthrough cases of COVID despite being vaccinated. Often these present with mild cold-like symptoms. So if you have any cold symptoms, please keep in mind our 7th UU principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, and stay home. Also, remember to get your annual flu vaccine if you haven't done so already. Be safe and well. And now back to the Reverend Tom Rossiello at the Hotel Aldea.
Today we light our chalice in honor of the lives of those members of this fellowship, those members of our family, and all those who have touched our lives and have gone before us. The light of their lives continues to shine, though it be from a distant shore. The preciousness of their lives still casts about us its radiance. In memory, we carry a spark from their flame in our hearts. On this Day of the Dead, It is the spirit of life that we celebrate. We hold close to our roots, remembering those before us, and we reach too into the future of what can be when we come together in ever new and ever expanding community. It is the spirit of love, fuente de amor, that we celebrate today too. Love for those gathered here in person or via Zoom, love for family and friends, love for those who especially need our love for those who've gone before us. And now we sing Spirit of Life and Spirit of Love. Please join first in English and then in Spanish. For those of you using the hymnal, the Spanish words are in the front cover, pasted, or they'll be posted on the screen as well. And now the words will appear and Malcolm will lead you.
Let us now join together and give voice to our covenant. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
We now enter into a very sacred time in our service, a time when members and friends share significant joy, sorrows, and concerns with their community. If you have a joy, sorrow, or concern you would like to have shared in an upcoming service, please email it to me. And if you are on Zoom and have one you wish to share this morning, please type it into the chat now. For each joy, sorrow, or concern, Kathy will light a candle honoring that person, that prayer, is with us this morning. There'll be a time later in the service to remember deceased loved ones on this Day of the Dead. Let us now share other joys, sorrows, and concerns. Our first candle is one of get well wishes to Françoise Joholland. This past week, she damaged her Achilles tendon, a 20% rupture. The good news is she does not need surgery. The bad news is she's kind of immobilized and has to wear one of those ugly big boots. I know she would appreciate notes of support and visits, especially after her daughters are here. They're here, I think, for the next few days. This next candle is lit by the book group that's reading Naomi Klein at the moment. As the International Conference on Climate Change is to begin in Scotland, they wish to share this hope as expressed in Klein's book. Climate change acts as an accelerant to many of our social ills, inequality, wars, racism, sexual violence. But it can also be an accelerant for the opposite, for the forces working for economic, social justice, and against militarism. Indeed, the climate change crisis, by presenting our species with an existential threat and putting us on a firm and unyielding science-based deadline, might just be the catalyst we need to knit together a great many powerful movements bound together by a belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We continue to celebrate the rising number of vaccines, especially here in Mexico. We are thrilled with the number of people who have already had one shot. I read this week, I think as many as 80% of Mexicans have. And also this week, we celebrate the fact that the 30-year-old age group will be able to get their second shot. At the same time, our thoughts and prayers for full recovery are with those who still have gotten COVID or have gotten breakthrough COVID. Personal joy for me, many of you know I have two adopted beautiful little granddaughters, Vanessa and Michelle, and they turned 1 year old this week. And another joy, many of you saw that the U.S. State Department issued its first passport ever with a gender indication of X this week. Neither male or female, but those who identify as gender fluid or neither one of those. That's a huge step forward for those in the non-binary community and so many people who are now can be honestly designated on their passport. So let us celebrate that too. Also, Paula, I'll turn to Paula to see if we have any typed in chat this morning. Do you want to share those?
We send best wishes to Jeannie Seward McGee and her family. Jeannie's daughter fractured her ankle, and they have gone to be with their daughter in Puerto Vallarta. Best wishes for perfect healing to Jeannie's family and her daughter.
And now a final candle for all those joys, sorrows, and concerns held deep in our hearts, but which remain unspoken this morning. Let us pause for a moment and hold them all. As we do, we seek the courage to face our own challenges and the resolve to support, comfort, and assist those who are experiencing difficult times. Amen.
Good morning. I'm Paula Peace, and it's my privilege today to share this time of generosity with you. Each week, we eagerly update the fellowship on news from one of the 12 NGOs which we support with annual grants, or we sometimes introduce some of our fellowship volunteers who serve on our board of directors or other important committees. Today, I'd like to introduce you to our dedicated and talented staff who make our in-person and Zoom Sunday services possible. I'll begin with Joseph Plummer. In his career, Joseph worked for the St. Petersburg Times and as associate editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Subsequently, he worked in the corporate sector for a major public utility and the Pittsburgh Technology Council. Joseph currently serves as secretary on our fellowship's board of directors. And in February 2020, Joseph stepped in after the passing of John Sievert to take over writing our all-important weekly service articles for Atención and other online listings. And then he began recording and editing the bloopers out of our weekly Zoom services and has to date posted more than 90 recordings on the YouTube channel named UUFSMA. In today's service, Joseph further shares his gifts with us as editor and producer of our 2021 virtual Day of the Dead altar video. Bravo and many thanks, Joseph. I wave to you on Zoom. Denise Gallipo was this fellowship's first employee and has been working for our fellowship since 2015. Her career was in broadcasting, advertising, communication, desktop publishing, and then web design, working in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. She works as our webmaster, produces our weekly Tuesday newsletters and Sunday orders of service, and for the last 6 months has provided excellent administrative expertise for our super busy Sunday service committee. Diana Amaya is trained as an industrial designer with a specialty in packaging engineering. Since joining our staff in February 2019, she has assisted our treasurer with many details of bookkeeping, and she provides tech assistance for Zoom, manages our Google email group, and our social media. And she serves as backup technical assistant during Sunday Zoom broadcasts, as she is at this moment. More than once, when internet dropped, Diana has stepped in seamlessly from a different location to take over sharing music videos and to keep us on the air. Miguel Angel Espinoza is here with us in the Aldea. Miguel Angel is our newest staff member, joining us only 6 weeks ago. He trained as an engineer in business and currently works in production at Bellas Artes, the Organ Festival of San Miguel, and the Chorale San Miguel. He sings with that wonderful bass voice in various choral ensembles here locally. Miguel Angel operates our 2 cameras during Sunday services, is in charge of the live audio, and assists with all the setup and breakdown of audiovisual equipment. And when it comes to our Zoom Sunday services, and today is number 84, the man who has made it all possible is Diego Vargas. I hope on Zoom you're all doing this. Fortunately, we had just hired Diego to run our audio system about 6 weeks before COVID shut down our live services in March 2020. During his studies in audio engineering in Mexico City, Diego also studied video editing and was interested in learning and gaining more experience in that field. Well, could we put him to work? This fortuitous combination led to Diego's editing numerous music, dance, and poetry videos to share during our Zoom broadcasts. He's been busy adding lyrics to hymns and doing some pretty creative double screening during interviews, plus sharing photos during guest speakers' talks. During our Sunday services, he directs all the various Zoom elements, including live speakers here at the Aldea, previously recorded reports, and guest speakers by Zoom, switching among all these many different elements through the complicated OBS platform on the fellowship's laptop. He's working like the director at a television station. We all owe a huge debt of gratitude to Diego, without whom our weekly Zoom Sunday services would simply have not been possible. Thank you, Diego and Denise, Diana, Miguel Angel, and our fellowship member, volunteer, Joseph Plummer. You guys are fellowship superstars. The offering today will help support our annual grants to 12 Mexican NGOs, the rental costs of our Sunday meeting space and Zoom transmission, plus the modest salaries for our staff team. Our staff and tech team have truly been the critical link in our building more and more beloved community during this otherwise isolated time during the COVID pandemic. Please share your generosity today in person or on our website at uufsma.org. The offering will now be collected and most gratefully received.
The Day of the Dead, often also known as All Souls Day, is celebrated in many different cultures around the world, but it's truly a very special holiday here in Mexico. Some of the traditions associated with the Day of the Dead here date back to the Aztec times. One is the legend of La Llorona, the wailing woman, who's said to roam the earth looking for her drowned children. This legend is reenacted each year in Mexico City, with a woman veiled in white roaming in the night in search of the deceased ones she loved. But in the past 2 years, the reenactment has taken on a new meaning. La Llorona's plight has been seen to represent the plight of those who lost loved ones to COVID, those who died alone in hospitals, away from their families. So this morning in this service, when we remember the dead, especially those who died in this time of COVID, we shared with you the traditional Day of the Dead song based on that legend, but made new again by this struggle with COVID. We heard it performed by 2 local musicians and San Miguel natives, Morgana Love and Mauro Ledesma. Well, as you experience here in San Miguel each year, there are many rich traditions associated with the Day of the Dead. Everywhere we see the calacas, the skeletons. We see the sugar candy skulls and the animals. We see the Katrinas, those skeletons dressed in their splendid outfits, doing what they did in life, making music, dancing, cooking meals, having a good time. We see the brilliant orange and yellow of marigolds in pots and in gardens. And above all else, we see the ofrendas, the beautiful altars of remembrance. Today, we have created our altar of remembrance both in the cyber world and here in this room. Thanks to many of you who have either brought your loved ones' photos here today or contributed them to our virtual altar that Joseph Plummer has so beautifully put together. With a spirit of reverence and love for those who've gone before us, I invite you to view our virtual Day of the Dead altar, after which we'll light the candles on our altar here in remembrance in the room. And during the time when we light the candles, you are invited to speak aloud or to type into the chat if you're on Zoom the names of those deceased loved ones you brought with you in your hearts to this service. And now, our virtual altar. And now we invite you to mention the names. We'll begin lighting the candles in memory of all of those that you just saw in our virtual. And please feel free to speak out names now that you would like remembered, or to type them into chat, and we'll share them as the candles are lit. For Joe, for Tom, for Steve. For Emilio Rossiello, for Marjorie Rossiello, for Rosemarie Rossiello, for Raymond Rossiello. You may speak names now. Anyone feel free to speak a name.
Bernie Weissman, founder of the fellowship.
Walter Davies.
For June Gill.
Abigail Carrier. Tom Frazee, good friend and pillar in my life. Karen Hinton.
Israel Belkin, Francis Belkin, Irving Belkin, Elizabeth Belkin, Laura Feingold, Harvey Feingold.
Helen and Bud Aspel, Bernie and Janie Wolf.
Ann, Richard, and Jack Skelly.
Holly Goodwin, who lived to be over 100 years old.
Stephen Long, Stephen Dutel, and all those who died of AIDS.
Don Jenneru.
Catherine Greenhouse, a lovely, intelligent, and creative woman who's the reason I came to Mexico and the reason I came to San Miguel de Allende.
Thank you.
Danielle Israel.
Carol Halliday.
Augie Valti.
Lance Marcone.
Paula, do you have some?
Daryl McGuire.
Robert Emmett Baines. Michael Ingber. Philip Hertz. Charles Dougherty. Terry Dougherty. Philip Hertz. Laura Jean Johanningsmeyer. Bud Johanningsmeyer. Dick Newbuck. Philip McPherson, Bill Snyder, Mike Borman, Bill Stansbury, Velda Quinn, Aida Rosario Marcan, Guadalupe Rosas, Pa and Gam, Isidra Horta, Antonio Amaya, Tim McGee, Jenny Meisels, Fanny Benjamin, Mary Ramirez, Volvda Feinstein, Ruth and Roy Lewis, Betty and Joe Torino, Lucy Torino, Howard Bach, Chauncey Newbeck, Dolores and Ted Sullivan, Jack and Bess Sorin, Carol Schulohner, Ada Kalb, Ruth Buch, Rose Surin, Neil, Ed, Philip Weirney, Patricia Sullivan Geyer, Madonna Geyer Shapiro, Ernesto Herrera, Larry Mills, Tim Hickey, Buzz and Eunice Schifferle, Pepe Perez, Nino Kirov, Rolando Alarson, Wilfrido Servin.
The words of Frederick Buechner. When you remember me, it means you've carried something of who I am with you, that I left some mark of who I am on who you are. It means that you can summon me back to your mind, even though countless years and miles may stand between us. It means that after I die, you can still see my face and hear my voice and speak to me in your heart. Remember me. Recuérdame. 15 years ago, I walked around Centro admiring its beauty, and as I walked down Misiones and later down the Ancha, what I saw in 2 display windows gave me pause. You know, there were caskets on display. In one window, a stack of them, arranged like a layer cake, with one for the adult on the bottom and then getting progressively smaller to infant size on the top. You'd never see that in the US, I thought. Why, right here in display windows on main streets, were they on display? It made me a little bit uneasy, but it also began the process of opening my eyes to something important. In some cultures, death is more visible, more present in everyday life than in others. I think the same could be said for certain times in one's life. There are times when the reality of people dying is more than something we put on the back burner or don't speak about or do not hear about. Instead, there are times and places where we live with death all around us. You know, I know that's true for what I heard of soldiers fighting in the battles, where friends might be fighting with them one day and then dead the next. But certainly that's not the only experience, the experience of war, that can make us keenly aware of death. As a gay man, when I was in my late 20s and 30s, just coming to the point that I could really celebrate who I was, friends of mine around me, other gay men, became strangely ill. And gay men I knew were dying, many in their 30s and 40s. And the reality of death was all around me. It was a time when death from AIDS, although largely being ignored by the mainline media, was certainly very present in my life. And I know that some of you share that experience with me. So when COVID struck, there was a sense of déjà vu for some of us, a sense that we had been there before. In some ways, I guess my experience with the AIDS pandemic prepared me for this time of COVID. I guess I knew a terrible disease could come, one that could strike people dead, often people from a particular group or demographic hardest hit. One of the most striking things for me personally of recent has been that some of those people who survived HIV, even AIDS, who didn't get it, or some who lived well on antiviral drugs for the last 30 or 40 years, have been taken by COVID. Let me put it in perspective for you, my personal perspective. I lost a housemate at the time to AIDS more than 30 years ago. His former partner died of COVID last April. Of course, the big difference between COVID and HIV is that COVID is affecting everyone, not just at that time, a largely unacceptable group of people, and therefore it has been not taken years and years for the public to reach an outcry about what's happening, for all people to pay attention. It took years, maybe decades, for news of AIDS to appear regularly in the media and to get a minimal amount of attention from government officials. So as bad as we think COVID is, as we watch the numbers of deaths tick up to over 4 million now, we should also remember that 37 million people have died of AIDS. I know several of these candles here are for them. But numbers aside, the personal experience of COVID for all of us, just like the experience of HIV/AIDS was for some of us, has surely caused us to think more about death. Although those we have lost, especially to this disease we've focused on, and even we've probably focused on our own mortality. As the Day of the Dead celebration reminds us each year, and perhaps especially in this time of pandemic, life is uncertain and death is all around us. The question for us becomes, or should become, not how do we avoid looking at death, but how do we engage with it? Speaking about the Day of the Dead, Margaret Atwood wrote, "In Mexico, they do this festival the right way. Bright candy skulls, family picnics at the grave, a plate set out for each individual guest, a candle for the soul. Everyone goes away happy, including the dead. But we have rejected this easy flow between dimensions. We want our dead unmentionable. We refuse to feed them. Our dead, as a result, are thinner, grayer, harder to hear, and hungrier. As you saw in the video earlier, the Day of the Dead is not some quiet day of mourning. It is a day of celebration. Families go to the cemetery, but not for a few minutes of quiet and respectful prayer at the grave of a loved one. No, they go for the whole day, bring a wonderful picnic feast and musical instruments, and they have a party at the grave with the deceased loved one. The Day of the Dead is not a day of sadness, but a day of happiness and renewed relationship. For them, the dead live on, not in some distant place of their Catholic theology, but on this day especially, they're right here, in this town, in this village, with their family. And they don't just engage with them in the cemetery. There'll be a sugar skull with the name of the deceased in a prominent place in the home, and marigold petals might be strewn on the sidewalk leading to the house, reminding that dead soul of the way home. A family will gather and often make the deceased's favorite meal for him or her, and the dead will take part in the conversation and the festivities of the day. It's a happy day when everyone is in a way together again. You know, I don't want to suggest that Mexicans do not mourn their dead. Of course they experience the loss of a loved one just as we all do. They do their share of weeping and mourning. But somehow they come to a place where they don't so much think of them as dead as just gone before, and even still with them. Today, our dead are in this room with us because we brought them here in our hearts. On this day, we remember all those who touched our lives in the past and still are present in our heart, even though they've died. We celebrate their lives, and we celebrate our ongoing relationship to them, even though they are no longer physically with us. Today, on this Day of the Dead, I ask that we not only remember those from our families and fellowship who have gone before, but I'd like us to think about, to engage with those in your life and in your community, especially the ones that you lost during this time of COVID. And notice I said during COVID and not just from COVID, because this disease not only took loved ones from us, it dramatically altered and even prevented how we could be with loved ones at the end, and if we could gather in any ritual to mourn, or if others could come together to celebrate their lives. COVID robbed us of much of the opportunity to say goodbye and to celebrate the lives of those who died in ways that were most meaningful to us. You know, my dad died in April, not of COVID, but during COVID. He was confused with dementia, and the isolation imposed by COVID restrictions was very hard on him. And like many people, his will to live during COVID died first. He was 94 years old, and it's not sad that it was his time to die, but it is so sad that he had to die under those conditions. I couldn't be with him. My brother did get to be with him twice in the last few days before he passed. My last time with my dad was via a hospice nurse holding a cell phone and FaceTiming me, showing him resting peacefully. At the time, we were not able to gather and celebrate his life like we would have liked to. And I know many of you lost family during the time of COVID, maybe from the disease or maybe not. But you faced the same restrictions. Many of us attended several funerals via Zoom. Better than nothing, but not enough. For these people especially, I think we need this year's Day of the Dead celebration. Remembering them today takes on extra importance. And of course we need to remember those who died from the disease, many taken before their time. Most who died without family and friends supporting them. Approximately 4 million men, women, and children. Each one's passing left a hole in the fabric of a family or a community. In a way, by feeling their presence today, by bringing them back and engaging with them as we do, even maybe today, we make that fabric whole or partially whole again. You know, I mentioned to you earlier that the former partner of my roommate who died of AIDS many years ago, who miraculously himself survived the AIDS pandemic, died of COVID in this time before vaccines were available. He was a dear friend and a very fine musician. We worked together on many music-related projects. For a time, I sang in a very fine choir he directed. And one of my fondest memories of him was helping him to produce a beautiful Christmas recording of the cathedral choir he directed. It's right here. Because it was an inner-city cathedral, we had to record very late at night to avoid street noise. We started at midnight, when it was pretty quiet. We made sure we did everything we could to make the space as quiet as possible. The choir warmed up, there were a couple note checks, we were ready to go. The recording engineers had the perfect placement of mics all set. All the equipment was adjusted correctly. We started to record the first piece, and no more than 5 minutes into it, a faint hum started, which got louder and louder and louder. What we had not factored in was the street sweeper that was slowly circling the block around the cathedral. We had to stop and wait almost an hour until the sweeper completed its work. I remember our time so well in that dark cathedral at 1 o'clock in the morning, and the patience and good spirit he conveyed to a bunch of rather grumpy singers. Well, we got the recording done, and I pulled it out again this week, and I brought it today for our altar as a way of reconnecting with my good friend Joe, lost to COVID. Today is a day to connect again with those loved ones who have gone before us, to bring those mementos, those pictures, spend time with them. Joe's presence is present profoundly today, and it feels good to reconnect. The dead live on with us when we remember them. Today we have invited you to be in relationship with those who live on with you, those whose flame burned on this altar. But I also want to just for a moment turn the tables a bit. I think the Day of the Dead is also a really good time to think about our own mortality, or perhaps I should say our own immortality. I'm sure there are many different views among us here on whether or not there's an afterlife, but I think we all have to agree that we do live on here in the lives we've touched and in the good deeds we've done. I've been thinking about that in relationship to the young members in my family. It's not just about the interactions we have with them now, it's about what we give them that will live beyond us and maybe help to sustain them in some way when we're gone. You know, I hope we're all around for a long time to come. But you know, this is a good time not just to remember those who we hold fondly in our hearts, but also maybe to think about how we might be remembered as some Day of the Dead in the future. It's not a morbid thought, and I think it might even serve to improve the quality of our relationships right now. When we're gone, we will still be speaking. If we're parents or grandparents who spent valuable time with children or grandchildren, we'll still be guiding them. If we're teachers, we'll still be teaching students. If we're musicians, our music will still be playing. If we're artists or crafters, our creations will be here. If we're scientists, our discoveries will. A counselor's good advice given, a good cook's recipes, she passes on, always, that we live on. We may live on elsewhere in worlds beyond our knowing, but for sure we live on here in the lives we've touched. And just as those who've gone before us live on in our lives. Those we walked the journey of life with still walk with us in spirit. We still love those who loved us. We possess them in our hearts. And in the future, when we're gone, the light we've brought will shine, the love we've shared will still be felt, and the relationships we nurtured will still be precious to those we left behind. I invite you now to conclude this sermon with me in song, hymn number 96, I Cannot Think of Them as Dead. not think of them as dead who walk with me no more. Along the path of life I tread, they are but gone before. They are but gone before. And still their silent ministry within my heart has place, as when on earth they walked with me and met me face to face, and met me face to face. Their lives are made forever mine, what they to me have been, as left henceforth in seal and sign engraven deep within, engraven deep within. Mine are they by an ownership, nor time nor death can bring. For God has given to love to keep its own eternally, its own eternally. In the words of the 4th century Bishop of Constantinople, John of Christendom, those whom we love and lose are no longer where they were before. They are now wherever we are. Our beloved dead are ours to keep. They still speak to us, minister to us. They are but gone before, and as long as we remember them, they are here with us. Yes, we have our losses, especially in this time we miss those lost during COVID. They too live in our hearts and minds. They rise again in the faces of their children and in the works and good deeds they did and of the love they gave. And we too rise again with resilience to face this ongoing challenge, to honor every life lost for all they gave and for all the ways they lived their lives. The children they raised, the gifts they shared, the love they made real, continue to bless the world. Every day, and especially on this day, we honor the dead, and they rise again. Their light of their flame still casts about us its radiance. They are part of the light we share, which we now extinguish our chalice, but whose light we carry forth from this place in our hearts.